Thank you all for coming out today. Thank you for standing up with our brothers and sisters across this country and across this world who declare out of the love in our hearts that our community will be a welcoming community for everyone. My name is Andrew Werthmann. I serve here on the City Council. We're joined by a number of fellow City Council members this morning as well, and I want to thank them for being here. Thank all of you. And today I want to share a story from one of our neighbors. Their story of immigrating to our community. I came to this country because I had no choice. My mother died when I was 5. My dad was an alcoholic, was never around. My grandfather and grandmother are the ones who raised me. I worked from the age of 7. My older sisters were already married and had their own family. My older brothers, were already in the U.S. When I was about 14, my grandfather pulled me aside and said, "You need to get out because there is no future for you here in Mexico." Leaving my country at that time was not an easy thing. It meant quitting school, leaving my family. I didn't know the U.S. I didn't know any English. My grandfather's arranged for my brothers to buy a coyote to come get me. A coyote brings people from Mexico illegally into the United States. It's their business, how they make their money. I don't know what my brothers paid then, but nowadays it can cost $2,000 to $3,000, if not more. My brothers paid the coyote to get me to Los Angeles, where my brothers lived. They had to trust this coyote to get me safely out of Mexico and into the United States. I was 14, really just a boy, when the coyotes came to get me at my grandparents' house. We took a bus from Pueblo to Mexico City. There, my brothers had paid for airfare so we could take a flight to Tijuana. Though it was more than 2 decades ago, I still remember that it was a Thursday evening when we checked into our hotel room. On Friday, he moved me to a different room. We opened the door to that new room, and there were about 40 people all crowded in. They were all strangers. The coyote told me to wait for them, and then he left. I did what I was told. I waited all day and all night. At 9 o'clock that night, there was a knock on the door. It was time. My coyote took my hand and held it in his. He told me to hold on to his hand and not to let loose. My brothers were paying him to get me safely to Los Angeles. He didn't want to lose me, so I held on. It was January. It was cold and rainy that night. We walked about 2 hours. Suddenly the coyote stopped, motioned for me and everyone to get down, to be quiet. The fear that I got, he quietly told me to lie and not to look up. I lay there as still as I could. The rain was coming down now and pooling on the ground. I could feel it soaking into the front of my shirt, collecting, pooling under my face. I remember the water getting next to my nose, close to my nose, and feeling of panic. But I didn't move. After a while, he told me it was all clear. And when he gave the signal, we were to get up and run. We ran. We ran and ran till we could run no more. And then we walked. We walked all night and into the next day. On Saturday, we stopped outside of San Diego in the hot desert. My coyote told me that a van would show up in a while. He told me I had to be the first one to get on, and when he gave the signal, I was to run to the van as fast as I could. The van showed up. Coyote gave the signal. I took off running and climbed into the back of the van. What I didn't realize is that there would be adults, all adults, traveling in the van with me. I was first on and they told me to lay down on my stomach. Then they began to stack us like logs. One with feet there, the other with head there. You know, on top of each other. I almost died. They put all of the weight on top of me. I was just 14 years old and had to carry everybody on my back. I made it. I made it for a reason. Gerardo made it to California. The first thing that he learned was how to speak English and count money, so that with the other neighborhood kids, he could buy ice cream when the ice cream truck rolled by. He worked, went to night school, learned English, played soccer, and graduated from high school. He had hoped to join the U.S. military, but a soccer injury prevented him from doing this. He and a buddy traveled east, stopping in Minneapolis, where he learned to be a chef. He met his wife at his work, and they moved homeward to Wisconsin, where he worked at a job he loved, making and serving meals for elderly in a retirement community. They bought a home. Their 2 children were enrolled in the public schools. They were both happy in pursuing their American dream. Then 9/11 happened. His employer checked his status. He was not an authorized citizen. He was told to fix the situation and was dismissed. They moved to Eau Claire and started their own business. Their business was successful and they had 6 employees, and in fact, Volume 1 awarded their business one of the best of in the Chippewa Valley. In 2007, in response to 9/11, the Wisconsin state adopted the Real ID Act, which required all licensed drivers to provide proof that the driver was legally authorized to live there. When Gerardo's license expired, he could not renew it. Fear set in. Would he be stopped by the police for driving without a license, and would that result in his deportation? Gerardo became frustrated by his trying to run a business without a valid driver's license. He was distressed by phone calls his business was getting, people telling him to go back where he came from. And it hurt him to see his children afraid for him. Gerardo, who has lived in the U.S. for more than 25 years, did 2 things. First, he hired an immigration attorney to see if there was any way for him to get a green card. Second, he came out of the shadows and he told his immigration story. That's the story that you just heard. Gerardo worked with a local immigration attorney who helped with the paperwork. Together they found a sponsor who guaranteed that if he ever needed monetary assistance, the sponsor would cover it, not the U.S. government. He traveled to Juarez, Mexico, and stayed while his immigration attorney filed for paperwork. And he waited. And after about 2 weeks, the American consulate approved his legally entering the United States and gave him a green card. A card that will allow him to drive legally, and if he chooses, to apply for American citizenship. It had been a long journey. Thank you.
Not here. So again, I want to thank the organizers too. We have Jesse up here, and then my good friend Maria back here, who's been emceeing this. So thank you for doing this, especially to bring awareness just of a very critical issue and a critical time in our country's history. I think we can all agree what's happening at our southern border to children and families, it's nothing short of travesty, a total affront to human rights and dignity. One day in the not too distant future, I believe that we're going to reflect on this time in history where migrant children were being separated from their parents, and we're going to think to ourselves, how was this allowed to happen and why is no one being held accountable? At this point, thousands of migrant children have now been separated from their caregivers and parents, and at least 7 children that we know of have died in ICE custody since last year. It's chilling for me to hear the voices of these children and see images on social media and in the news, the unsanitary conditions, the foil-like blankets. It's chilling. Because any government that is willing to treat just one child this way is capable of treating any child and our children this way too. And that should scare us beyond belief. Children deserve compassion. They deserve opportunities and an education, not to be relegated to an existence of confinement and entrapment. Any government that's willing to allow this practice to continue is not a government dedicated to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A 3-year-old boy in detention handed by a guard to a girl aged 11 to care and feed him. A 2-year-old girl in detention who had no diaper, wet her pants, and was wearing mucus-smeared shirt for 5 days. A 2nd grade girl in detention who does not know where her parents are. These are the stories. This is what we're allowing to happen right now. Make no mistake, caging children is a for-profit enterprise. The people who profit off of these camps then go on to finance the political campaigns of those who support continued detention. Private detention facilities make hundreds of dollars per day, per child, and apparently that funding is not enough to even cover soap, or a toothbrush, or an actual bed. As I said before, what is happening on our southern border to children and families is nothing short of travesty, a total affront to human rights and dignity, and is totally condemned by the United Nations as an arbitrary and unlawful interference in family, life, and a serious violation of the rights of the child. And it's also worth noting here that the United States is the only country in the world that has not ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Locally, I'm thankful that we live in a community that is compassionate and resilient. We are a community that embraced being a refugee resettlement site for the Hmong brothers and sisters. We are a community that has a variety of organizations providing advocacy, resources, and legal support for immigrants and those seeking asylum. And our school district does not cooperate with ICE and has established itself as a welcoming and safe haven district through policies, practices, and programs. Level, we have amazing people doing amazing things every day, including lots of people in this audience, so thank you for that. And their compassion and commitment is an inspiration to me, but the gains we make cannot stop at the local level. Today we need to make it clear to our leaders and to the world that we need to stop funding the detention of children, that families need to stay together. And our work must be intersectional. Because whether it is our immigrant neighbors, indigenous people, folks of color, folks with disabilities, the LGBTQ community, and other marginalized communities, these struggles are a struggle for dignity and for human rights. So today, I need you to make some promises to yourself and to your friends. That you will not sit out the 2020 election. That you will register to vote and find 10 people to help them. That you will visit with organizers today and find ways to make an impact. That you will consider making a donation to the Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services. That you will look into your family investments to ensure that your dollars are not supporting immigrant detention facilities. That you will take some time and get involved beyond social media, to knock on doors, to organize events, hold forums, write and call your legislators, maybe even run for office yourself. Because this is a crucial time in our country's history, and each and every one of us needs to show up, organize, and cause some good trouble. The children deserve nothing less than our total advocacy. That's what we have to continue to do, and we can't let up. And I'm also going to personally throw in another thing here, another challenge. So for those of you that are doing everything that I mentioned, or almost everything, I challenge you to do more. No policy should be created and implemented without input and participation from those who are closest to the issue with lived experience. Diversity in all parts of our government and diverse voices when creating policy is how I believe we create the best policies so we don't continue to perpetuate the atrocities we are witnessing today. So thank you again for all being here, and let's get to work.
Joey Roberts, and I'm a local transgender rights activist. Today I want to speak to the plight of some very special immigrants, the one of transgender immigrants seeking asylum from oppression, violence, and often murder in their home countries. So I'm going to share with you the story as reported by The Guardian and multiple other newspaper sources about Joanna Medina Leon, a 25-year-old trans woman from El Salvador who came to the United States seeking freedom to be herself, seeking a better way of life, and simply seeking safety. In her home country of El Salvador, she was a certified nurse. She came to the United States as a migrant. She was detained on April 11th of this year. While in custody, she asked for medical care on multiple occasions. She was denied this medical care. She went so far as to ask for the ingredients so that she could make her own IV fluids. So after she was once again denied, she actually asked to be deported. And I want everyone to think about that. This is somebody who had traveled from El Salvador that asked to be deported because of how she was being treated. She had journeyed to the United States in hopes of finding the American dream, but she became so desperate for medical treatment that she'd asked to be sent away. The very place that she thought would make her safe. You see, as horrific as the conditions are in these concentration camps, and as horribly as the general population is oftentimes treated, ICE treats LGBTQ migrants even worse. Transgender women are frequently forced into custody with men and dead-named. They are sexually assaulted, raped, and harassed. The guards verbally assail them, and on top of it all, they deny them hormone therapy, which is a violation of ICE's own regulations. Joanna was detained for 6 weeks. When she fell deathly ill, ICE took her to El Paso, Texas, where she was released on parole. 4 short days later, she died. The date was June 1st, the first day of Pride Month. She never got the opportunity to realize her dreams. Something I'm really not very proud of. Joanna didn't need to die. If she had been treated with the basic human decency and dignity we all demand, she'd be alive to live her dreams. But Trump's America murdered her. We all share responsibility in her loss, and we should all be ashamed. To her family and friends, I am sorry. There are so many good people in this country, but we simply weren't powerful enough to save her. We all lost a sister that day. When I think about people needlessly dying like this, I can't help but wonder what we've lost, what she might have gone on to do, and who she might have become. Our lives are all so very frail. We need to learn to love life in all forms. Now, this isn't the America that I grew up in. The America I grew up in welcomed immigrants. We were taught in school that America is the world's melting pot, that it's a place where anyone can come and make something of themselves. That diversity has always made us stronger and will continue to do so in the future. We shouldn't run from it, we should embrace it. So when did we lose our way? When did we lose our heart, our soul? What happened to our compassion and our empathy? Have we all forgotten? Let today be a reminder that it still exists and we can still do this. Now, here's where I was going to quote the New Colossus written by Emma Lazarus in 1883, but Representative Emerson already hit on it, so I'm not going to bore you with it a second time. Thank you very much.